Okay, so welcome to our next topic this morning, wherein we need to find a problem about the ellipse. So I have here a certain problem that we need to find the coordinates of the foci and its vertices, and the endpoints of the major axis, the minor axis, and the latus rectum for each ellipse whose center is actually at our origin with the coordinates 0, 0. So after that one, after solving the problem, we need to draw the ellipse, its foci, and it's also the directress. So please take note, our ellipse here is that the center or the center of our ellipse will be at the origin. So which means there are also problems that our center of our ellipse is actually at the coordinates hk. But then again, let's focus our attention first to this kind of problem wherein our center is at the origin. So given the problem number 1, you have x squared over 25 plus y squared over 9 is equal to 1. So before we can solve the problem, please take note that there are two standard equations of an ellipse. We have x squared over a squared plus y squared over b squared is equal to 1. And the other thing is x squared over b squared plus y squared over a squared is equal to 1 as well. Now, if you observe, there are variables that are given. So, let's have first the pointers. Now, please take note that our a should always be greater than our b. So that it's already the hint in which part of the standard equation that we will use given a certain problem. Because it's quite challenging for us to determine what certain equation that we have to use in order to solve that certain problem, especially given an x squared and b squared. So if you observe, if you look closely on this given equation, in the first equation you have x squared over a squared, while the other one is that I have x squared over the b squared. Now, how you will determine in our equation or in our problem the value of your a and the value of your b? So please take note that your a should always be greater than your b. So which means the greater number in the certain problem is actually the value of your a or a squared. So which means in our given problem, if you have x squared over 25 plus y squared over 9, which is greater, 25 or 9? So syempre, the answer is 25. So which means your 25 is now the value of your a squared. Okay? Because your a will always be greater than your b. So if your 25 is the value of your a squared and your 9 is the value of b squared, what certain formula in the standard equation wherein you can find that your x squared is over a squared, since 25 is the value of your a squared. So which means we will use this formula. Okay, so again, I will repeat that the a should always be greater than your b, which means whatever value that is greater than the other number, the greater number will always be the value of your a squared, while the lesser number is the value of your b squared. So just be careful. So if ever you have this kind also with your problem, later on I will also give you another problem wherein we need to use this kind of formula. So at this time, we will use this formula to solve our certain problem. Okay. Now, before we can solve everything, we need to solve first the value of your a, the value of your b, as well as the value of your c. Because we will use these certain values later on in determining our vertex, focus, major axis, and so on and so forth. So first, how we can actually solve for the value of your a? So please take note that your a squared is equal to 25. So which means, if your a squared, if you have a squared, how you will simplify a squared so that your answer will be the value of your a? So syempre, ato lang ang butangan og square root. Okay, that is in your grade 9 mathematics, no? Okay, so square root of 25 That's why, again, your a squared is equal to 25. So again, to get the value of your a, you just put the square root to cancel out the exponent of 2. So which means, square root of 25, you get the value of 5. Okay? And then, for the value of your b, again, since your b squared is equal to 9, you put the square root of your 9. So the square root of 9 is equal to, okay, 3. That's correct. Now at this point, to solve for the value of your c, you just have to square the a squared minus b squared. So which means, what is the value of your a squared is 25, minus the value of b squared is 9. So that is 25 minus 9 is equal to square root of 16. Okay? Now what is the square root of 16? That is equal to 4. So which means the value of your c is equal to 4, while the value of your b is 3, and the value of a is equal to 5. Now if ever that the value of your c cannot be simplified, for example, you have square root of 15, you can actually express that one into a decimal point or pwede ra dili. Okay? But I will suggest that you can simplify it into a decimal form so that during the graph, you can actually point it out in the coordinates. At least 2 decimal places. Okay? So at this point, since you have already the value of your a, b, and c, it's easy for us to determine right now the vertex. Okay? What will be the vertex of your ellipse? Now, since the vertex of an ellipse is actually 2, we can have vertices. Okay? So, we can put here as vertices, the plural for vertex. So, if you observe, based on your notes right now, the formula to find for the vertex of this given problem with the equation x squared over a squared plus y squared b squared is equal to 1, you can look at your notes. The formula to solve for the vertices is actually plus and minus a is to 0. Okay? So which means it's a positive and a negative number. We can have 2 vertex, which means you have vertices. Okay? Another thing, I will write first the formula. The plural for focus is foci because we have 2 focus in our ellipse. If you take note, we have positive and negative, C, and 0. Alright, so we will note first the important things that we need to solve. Another thing, for us to graph the, what they call this one, before we can graph our ellipse, we need also our major axis. Okay, so we need also our major axis. So your major axis, the formula to solve for the major axis is plus and minus a 0. Okay, so actually in this kind of formula, your vertex is actually your major axis, and that is correct. Okay, now what about the minor axis? Now the minor axis, to solve for the minor axis, that is 0 plus and minus b. So please take note of these things. Before we can graph the ellipse, we need this kind of the formula. Another thing is the endpoints of the latus rectum. Okay? The formula to solve for the endpoints of the latus rectum would be, okay, negative c plus and minus b squared over a. Okay, that is, these are 2 coordinates. Another two coordinates for the endpoints of the latus rectum. Please take note, if you can still recall in the parabola, we have two endpoints of the latus rectum that will serve as the guide to graph the parabola. Since we have normally and mathematically, we have two parabolas, no, to form an ellipse. Therefore, we have four endpoints of the latus rectum. Okay? So, another endpoint for the latus rectum would be a positive value of your C, then plus or minus B squared over A. So, again, you can refer it to your notes because I've already given you the notes. So, again, before we can graph our ellipse, we need to find for the vertices, the foci, the major axis, the minor axis, and the endpoints of the latus rectum. Later on also, we need to point out also our x-intercepts and y-intercepts. But we need to focus our attention to these important pointers, the vertices, foci, the major axis, the minor axis, the endpoints of the latus rectum, as well as the directrix. But later on, later na nato pangitaon ang mga directrix. Okay? So at this point, let's try to solve now the vertices. Okay? So I will abbreviate vertices as V. Okay? Please take note that the vertices is plus, minus, A, and 0. So, what is the value of your A? Your A is 5. So which means you have positive 5, 0, while the other coordinate is negative 5 and 0. So again, positive and negative A, 0. So which means your vertices are 5, 0 and negative 5, 0. Easy, di ba? Okay. Let's have now our attention to foci. Our foci, the formula is positive, negative C, 0. So which means the value of your C, which is 4. So therefore, you have 4, 0, and the other one is negative 4, 0. Right? Okay, next. Let's go now to the major axis. The major axis is actually like your vertex or your vertices. Okay? Because that is A plus A, 0. While the minor axis is 0, positive, and negative B. So we all know the value of your B is 3. So which means you have 0, positive 3, while the other one is 0, negative 3. Okay, so please take note of that one. Next, the most important thing is the endpoints of the latus rectum. Endpoints of your latus rectum. So LR, latus rectum. So at this point, to find for the endpoints of the latus rectum, we have 4 endpoints. The first one is negative C plus minus B squared over A. Okay? So, to solve for it, let us try. So you have endpoints of the latus rectum, negative C. Okay? What is our negative C? Your C is 4, so negative 4. Okay? Then positive, negative B squared over A. So let's focus first our attention to positive. So what is positive B squared? So again, B squared is 9. So that is 9 over your A. Your A is 5. Okay. Next. Again, negative 4 for negative C again. But this time, you have to go for the negative sign. Your B squared is 9. And again, your A is 5. So be careful on those things. Okay. So you have already 2 endpoints. Let's go down to the other, positive C endpoint. So that is positive 4 and positive 9 over 5. Again, they're quite the same lang, no? Okay? Because B squared over A lang gyapon siya. And then positive 4 and then negative 9 over 5. So, It's just like murarag 4 and 9/5 tanan. But negative, negative, positive, 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 negative, positive, negative. So inana lang siya. So again, please take note of the following. So again, before we can graph our ellipse, we need to find for the value of the vertices, the foci, the major axis, the minor axis, and the endpoints of the latus rectum. These are the important points for us to graph our ellipse. Okay? Thank you so much.